CRP Central. This is Dr. Fox. Please like, comment, subscribe. It helps the mission more than you know so that I can do more for you. Happy Monday again. Feels like deja vu. I feel like I literally just did one of these, but that's how fast the time is flying right now. Hey, we're in the middle of summer. I learned a little tidbit of knowledge that might help. I don't know, trivia might impress someone during trivia night. Do you know what a group of lightning bugs or fireflies is called? What do you call a group of fireflies? Anyone? It's called a sparkle. That's right. So we saw a sparkle of fireflies the other night, and it was pretty darn cool. But they were like, "Hey, what do you call a group of fireflies?" Yeah, it's called a sparkle. So I encourage you to, survive from the heat. But let me know if you see a sparkle of fireflies out there somewhere. Kind of an interesting little name. Welcome to TrialSide Chats, the place where the CRPN community comes together. We talk about all of the things in clinical research that bug us, that challenge us, that we might need help with, and we kind of support each other to make sure that everyone out there succeeds. So thank you so much. I see some viewers. It's really nice. If you have any comments, please feel free to reach out, talk about it, and let's start. Full disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, never said I was a lawyer, but this is some really, really dense and deep topic here. So as a result, here's the disclaimer. Please listen, make decisions, read, absorb at your own risk. And if you do not agree with this disclaimer at all, turn off the video right now. No harm, no foul, no worries. I just want you to be safe. So we are going through the journey. After we talk about the ground rules, I'm getting ahead of myself. Ground rules, anything finance. This is a very sensitive subject. So if you're talking, if you're texting, if you want to join the stage, everything must be confidential. We're not going to talk about names. We're not going to talk organizations. We're only talking about concepts so that we can bring forth the best practices that can help everyone in the industry. It's not one-sided. It's not lopsided. It's an understanding of everyone in the industry, their needs, and how we can best help them. So pop quiz, icebreaker. What is everybody's job? And if you don't know the answer to that, just look back at last week. Listen to me. I need to slow down, guys. Seriously. Look into last week's video and you'll get that answer. I'm not going to tell you here. I'm not going to tell you. So watch the video and you'll know that. Okay, so we're going to talk about some sections of the book today. There's the QR code. It's on Amazon.com. You're welcome to buy the book directly from Amazon or contact CRP Central. You see this pile of books back here? There's another box. Don't worry, everyone. I won't run out, but happy to send them to you free shipping and 10% off of what you'll see on Amazon. All right. Big congratulations to Brad Hightower, Cambridge University Press. From what I was looking at, the very first ever case study in the industry that really dissects out and asks the question, what are the best practices, the best standardizations that are validated with data at a private clinical research site? What works? I can tell you from this paper and from the data, these practices work. They are best practices, in my opinion, that balance that relationship of independent contractor and consumer, and they work. And you might be surprised on some of them, although if you've listened to my videos any, you probably won't be surprised at all. But the cool thing is, I say these things on the videos and, I'm just kind of talking all the time, but it's really cool to put the data to the words. This actually works. These things work, everyone, and they protect the site. So we're going down the trial management rabbit hole. So we are done with phase one. We're done with all the pre-study stuff. This is like the trial's going. We have active contracts that we need to manage on a financial level. And so that was what the last video was talking about, just a brief introduction to trial management. Now, today, we're going to go into accrual. Specifically, if you're going to sign a contract, if you're going to start work, you have to start earning money. And that is exactly what accrual is doing. Accrual is the process of recording accumulated revenue that is earned specifically based off of what a contract is allowing. So in this case, accrual would be you sign a contract, you sign a CTA, a clinical trial agreement. It says, hey, the site, we promise to do work. Sponsor, you promise to pay us. And these are all the things you're going to pay us for. That is the management of your contract budget. That is the management of accrual. So essentially, it's do work, something happens, and eventually you get paid. There's money in your bank account. But what exactly is in that little question mark? What happens? Well, clinical research is weird. Surprise, surprise. So clinical research has accrual, and that's okay. But importantly, its accrual has to be split up in different ways because there are sections of accrual that are paid and triggered automatically, like autopay. And then there are sections of accrual that accrue and then don't really start an aging process until they are realized and on an invoice. So in this case, we call it autopay accrual and invoice accrual. Autopay accrual is just that. And most of the time, it's dedicated to patient visits. In other words, a patient visit is performed. The coordinators enter something into the EDC. The EDC triggers the payment because it's complete. Then a site gets money in the bank. And sometimes they don't know why, but they just get money in the bank. They have to go and figure that out later. On the other side, work is performed, and then autopay does not happen. And as a result, the site has to have an internal process to communicate what has happened so that they can put it on an invoice and send it and then start tracking that invoice's age. So two big forks in accrual that a lot of industries really don't have to manage. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about accrual. We're going to talk about autopay accrual and invoice accrual, specifically like the overarching definitions of both of them and kind of how they work. We'll wait for a different episode for each one to really deep dive. But if you have any questions about accrual, autopay, or invoice, please feel free to reach out and comment. So ask comments and we'll start talking about that. So this is on page 70 of the book. This graph, there's a really cool description about it. And actually there's that red line stuff that I promised I wasn't going to show you. So that's kind of how you would redline it in the contract if you wanted to get your autopay or invoice in a certain way. All right, so let's start with autopay. Autopay seems easy, right? So you do work, CRCs enter data into the EDC, and you get paid. It's just that easy, right? It's that simple. Well, it's meant to be simple. The whole point of autopay was just to try to make things much more streamlined. I mean, it's great. You don't have to invoice for everything. That skips a step for sites. Sponsors get the data that they need. They don't have to pay someone to process invoices. It works. It's great. And honestly, it is the way of the industry. Most of the time, the only time you really have to invoice for everything anymore is when you're working with a really small sponsor. They don't have EDC, and so you have to invoice for everything. Sometimes there's international regulations where you have to send an invoice for everything. But in the world of EDC, what happens is you get a notice of invoice and you just have to literally copy everything that the sponsor sent you, which is an EDC report, throw it on your invoice, and then send it back to the sponsor. So it's this really weird, like extra step. The only difference is the site doesn't necessarily have to communicate what to invoice, although I would highly recommend validating that. But there's a lot of things that can go tricky with autopay. So first and foremost is it's really important to understand the difference between EDC, or electronic data capture, and CTMS. These are two totally different systems. CTMS, that is the site-owned product where they have a subscription, they pay a software company, and they have this organizational product that organizes everything for them, from the accrual and the performance of trials, sometimes into finance, eReg, eSource, all of these things. There's a third-party vendor who hosts a CTMS program that the site pays and therefore controls. EDC, or electronic data capture systems, have nothing to do with site control. They are solely the access point that sponsors have so that sites can communicate data performed into EDC, and then EDC is what sponsors see and then approve payment. So what's going to happen when you have an EDC for the sponsors to view and a CTMS for the sites to view, which, by the way, sites control access and sponsors very rarely have full view of CTMS? Well, you're going to have two different systems that are now going to require the same kind of information to be relayed between CTMS and EDC. And way too often, what happens is those poor and busy coordinators are getting so much pressure from sponsors. Fill out the data in the EDC, fill out the data in the EDC, do this EDC, do done. So the sponsors have applied so much pressure that the CRCs are actually prioritizing EDC, external data entry, over internal entry. And by internal entry, I mean all things data in EDC, which is really concerning for my eSource friends out there. eSource friends, tell me what's going to happen if a CRC enters data first into the EDC and then into CTMS where they have eSource. What happens? Alcoa Plus, anyone? Anyone? So sites, be sure that you correct that on CRCs. I get it. Sponsors are going to be very antsy. They want their data in the EDC. They want it now. That is never going to change. But what should also never change is Alcoa C, where you, the site, have to assure that source is recorded and that it is literally the source of truth. EDC to source is not how it needs to go. But on a financial level, what's crazy is that as far as autopay goes, CTMS is kind of where finance teams pull reports of accrual. So you go into CTMS, you say, okay, what's happened this week? I need to understand what visits were performed. So I'm going to go into CTMS, fill out a report, identify my accrual for that week based off of what happened. You're going to see protocol, date of service, and likely, hopefully, a participant ID. Hopefully, a participant ID. We won't go into the whole pre-screening no participant ID because no randomizations for screen fail problems. We'll talk about that at another time. But that's the theory. So what ends up happening is finance teams are looking at CTMSs as the source of truth. And oftentimes EDC gets filled out, but not CTMS. So then what happens is now finance teams no longer have accurate accrual reports because data was not entered in the correct places at the right times. So sites, a lot of groups are going to have data entry QA departments, kind of a thing where the data has a workflow and they assign people only to data entry. If you are that sophisticated, it turns into a really cool assembly line. You can perform a task, enter into source, QA it, and then when it's ready, enter into EDC in that order. If you're ever there, make sure that you also have that as a communication into the CTMS reports so that finance teams can have what they need. As a backup, so honestly, there's so much data entry error that is prone to CTMS reports that oftentimes I like to validate autopay and other visits to calendars. So sometimes sites will use like an Outlook calendar, they'll use a CTMS calendar, they'll use a calendar to coordinate all of the different visits. And it's a great source of information for autopay accrual. The caveat to calendars is when if you're looking at like a month at a time, many times there's something on a calendar that is not verified. Let's say that patient they were supposed to come in next Monday and they didn't. So they were a no-show, but nobody updated the calendar. So then if you're looking at as a report, you're like, okay, they showed up on Monday. I'll write this down at accrual. It didn't actually happen. So it's really important if you're going to use calendars to pull autopay, you really need to have that communication plan so that someone knows if something didn't happen, you need to denote that on the action of the calendar. Which leads us to the next one. So team communications. This is critical, everyone. I mean, you can have all the systems in the place in the world, but if you don't have the users of those systems communicating with each other, you're not going to understand the needs of everyone. From a financial perspective, I don't care if you do it from CTMS reports, from calendars, from a combination of everything. You want somewhere to have a list of everything that has successfully accrued at a site. As far as auto pay goes, just communicate the visits somehow, some way. Ideally through CTMS reports if your data entry is sophisticated enough to do it properly, but through validation of calendars, through team communications. Hey, we had someone show up last minute. They were in town. Let's add that to the calendar. Make sure the accrual is there. Whatever it is, it's really, really important to align all of your systems and all of your team members in place so that you can thoroughly communicate autopay accrual at all times. I prefer weekly. Weekly is great for semi-busy sites. If you're not a really busy site and you only see like maybe a couple patients in a month, monthly should be fine. But whatever it is, find your cadence and do it. The last source of information you ever want to learn about accrual from is actually the remittance advice. So you get a bank deposit, you ask the sponsor for detail on that bank deposit, you look at the bank deposit and you're like, huh, when did visit 7 happen? I never knew about that. It's not on my list of accrual. It's because somehow, some way, visit 7 was entered into the EDC, but it was never entered into the CTMS. So the site got paid for it, but the finance team had no idea about it. So they had to create an accrual line after the bank deposit to make up for the accrual that they did not know. My friends, that happens so much. Let me know out there if you're processing payments and you see this happening. It happens so much. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, why didn't you ever tell me about this? Oh, yeah, we just forgot to put it in CTMS. These people are using eSource, guys. That's not a cool thing. That's a really, really big red flag. If you learn about autopay accrual from your remittance advice, that should never happen like that, ever. But the point is, you're going to have autopay through visits, through all of these different things, CTMS reports, calendars, team communications, and autopay is starting to creep into other things that are not visits. There's a big, big push right now to try to do auto pay on startup, which is weird. So sites, if you do have contracts that are paying you auto pay for startup, make sure that somehow, some way you have a way to earmark that accrual in your system while you're waiting to be paid. That was the whole point of an invoice. If they're taking that out, you're going to have to figure out what to do that. Maybe apply an accrual line, maybe do a bill of sale, whatever it is, and then close out. There's a very prominent CRO out there who's also trying to auto pay weird things like pregnancy tests and any kind of operation thing. But what really drives me crazy is it seems very selectively targeted to choose what you want to auto pay. And by this, I mean, there's no way, shape, or form that regulatory items should not be auto paid. Monitoring visits. It's an official monitoring letter controlled by the CRA who submits it into the ISF. It is on record. How in the world and why doesn't that trigger an auto payment? IND safety reports and SUSARs, a huge, huge volume of potential invoiceable activity that is not auto paid, but is fully tracked over into eReg, over into all of these things, and it's not being auto paid. So sponsors and CROs, I mean, if you're going for efficiency, there's some really low hanging fruit that we could auto pay for that we are not. And so there's your challenge. If you really, really want to make this better, why are you targeting the 1 or 2 times in a trial to auto pay something like startup and closeout? Why aren't we targeting the high volume invoiceable things that don't have to be invoiced? Just auto pay them. Makes everyone's life better. But if you're going to auto pay this stuff, it can't just be trust me site, we're going to pay you and that's it. You need to send some kind of a notification letter, something that a site can put in its records so that it can track and hold sponsors and CROs responsible for what they say they are auto paying. And that is the biggest gap. It's the break in trust. How can we trust that you guys are going to auto pay when you don't give us any documentation of your intent? So let's fix that. Okay, so invoices. Invoices are a little different. So you can do the work, but if you don't process it in an invoice, you've just forfeited it. You have to get this on an invoice and submit it in order to get paid. So you do a bunch of work and then you communicate that work with your finance team and then you invoice. And by invoice, we'll talk about that later. But the point is that communication of work is probably one of the largest sources of error that we find in our site audits. There's this really, really weird disconnect. Maybe it's the coordinator saying, "Well, I didn't know that we got paid for that." That's a very, very common thing. Maybe it's the sponsor and CRO saying, "Well, we told you that you were supposed to invoice for this," and they left it at that. It's very possible the sponsor and CRO sees, "Oh my gosh, these guys haven't invoiced for anything, and then we've been working them for a year, and they're our top enroller. Should we say something? Should we ask them to invoice?" And sometimes the good ones do. So a big shout out to the ones who are actually they're working as a partnership with the site to make sure the site gets paid for the work that it performs. So invoice accrual can be found in a number of different places, just like autopay. Depending on how a CTMS is programmed, you can pull out invoiceable activity. This is great for operations. I think that's probably the best place because that's where the coordinators are going in and clicking on things. But you have to be real careful because if it's misprogrammed and any of the invoiceable activity is misclassified as autopay, then you're not going to get paid for it and you're just inflating your aging and you could be forfeiting potential revenue. Calendars and calendar systems are the same way. This is really, really good for like monitoring visits when you have to invoice for a monitoring visit and anything like that. But the biggest thing by far that can help with invoices is team communication. So part of that, remember I said coordinators are like, I didn't know you could invoice for that. Well, at the same time, there's many, many site owners out there who do not want their coordinators to know how much money is on the contracts. They're afraid of the coordinators expecting large raises without understanding expenses. And so as a result, you're going to have to try to figure out how to communicate the exact information needed to your staff members so that they can let you know when things are happening and when you can start to send invoices. So for this reason, I've created what I call a quick reference for a lot of my sites. This is my ability to very rapidly break the three pillars apart into the standard invoiceable items. And rather than show a dollar amount and the details, is quick. Unique name, right? But there's just an X. That's it. And all that X means is if you do this for this trial, let finance know. That's it. Let us know when this stuff happens and we'll take care of the rest. This is a super duper quick reference and powerful tool that can make sure to capture all of the revenue that you need with your team members without, and I do mean without, compromising your site's financial integrity. Another thing that you can do in a quick reference is you can very rapidly identify what sponsors are and are not compliant in their payments. In other words, like what if you gave this to a coordinator and it has a list of all of the compliance on there, all of the sponsors that are up to date on paying their bills. So if you look at that and then you have a CRA reach out to that coordinator and they're like, hey, I need to schedule a monitoring visit. Coordinator's going to have this quick reference. Okay, look at this. Oh, nope. Looks like I'm sorry. I'm going to have to contact my finance team because they've flagged your account because you haven't paid your bills. So please go talk to my finance team. And then when everything's cleared, come back to me. And then we can schedule that monitoring visit for you. All cordial, all fair, and all accountable. So the quick reference is something that I would recommend. There's a really cool description about it on page 124. And I do recommend, if you have a team that is flourishing, odds are you're probably missing out on things. So make your own quick reference for your teams, and you can watch and see how they start to adopt. What is everyone's job again? Not fooling me. I'm not going to tell you this time, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so I had a very interesting conversation with a big investor guy, and they are trying to analyze the value of a site based off of all of their books and their finances and their accruals and their revenue and everything. And this individual's opinion was, well, we just have to assume that we have a 100% invoice transition. So therefore, accrual is counted on the month of the service performed. And I sat there thinking, okay, so how does that work if you don't have a 100% invoice system? Which, by the way, I don't think anyone has a 100% invoicing system, because when you're managing hundreds of contracts that are completely unique from each other, it's almost like you're having to run 100 businesses worth of financial management. Every single thing has its nuance. You will miss things. I'm pretty sure it's engineered like that. So I would not recommend looking at accrual by the time it was performed, because it is not realized revenue yet. I'm going back to those invoiceables. I know that there are sites that are leaving 6 figures, 7 figures worth of money on the table because they don't have the appropriate financial systems in place to capture that revenue. It is not accrual until your contractual clock starts ticking. And by contractual clock, I mean both auto pay and invoice, and sometimes others like startup and closeout and things like that. They have their own contractual provisions. And as a result, your accrual is not counted accrual until that clock starts ticking. So for example, auto pay, most of the time, auto pay is going to go by service date. And by service date, I mean the time in which the trial participant or the service was performed for that trial participant. And the reason why it goes by service date instead of EDC entry is because, according to contract, EDC entry is to be completed between 48 and 72 hours prior to or after the service was performed. So there's already a really cool contractual stopping point where you're so close to that service date that that's a great time to calculate it. Most auto pay contracts are going to pay monthly. That's preferable within the month. So it's on some kind of a monthly cycle. If you do work in July, you're going to get paid in August, that kind of a thing. They can be paid quarterly within a 3-month period. I've seen biannual payments, so we're only going to pay you every 6 months. I've seen payments only when a CRA monitors the data. I have seen annual payments. I wouldn't recommend it. You're going to be working really hard and risking a lot for that. But AutoPay has different provisions, everyone. Now, let's talk about invoicing. Invoicing isn't necessarily by the service date. It doesn't matter when you did it. You could have done it last month. You could have done it 3 months ago. And if your IWO allows for it, you could have done 6 months ago. But that contractual clock doesn't start ticking until you put that on an invoice and you email it to the sponsor. That is when the accrual starts. Because before you put it on that invoice and sent it, you have the possibility of forfeiting that revenue. It is not realized. And there is a ton of unrealized accrual, unrealized revenue that has nothing to do with your metrics. So to my friends out there, I would love to have a conversation. Let me know your opinions on when you count accrual. Conservatively, I go by service date for autopay and invoice date for the invoice, not service date for an invoice. It doesn't work. It's just not how it works. Okay, and here's an example. So like, let's say this month, we have our list of invoiceables, we have our list of autopays, and then those put together turn into your monthly accrual. So invoiceables, look, we had dry ice, a monitoring visit, and an amendment. Look, 3 different things, 3 different service dates. Then we have auto pay. Looks like there were 3 visits that happened that month. So January must have been a slow month. They had a screening, a visit 1, and a visit 2. Maybe the screening is where they did the dry ice. I don't know. That looks like a different date. But those put together create your monthly accrual. So for the entire month, you had a screening visit, 2 visit 1s, and 1 invoice. 1. So invoice number 3, that 1 line of accrual, that constitutes the 3 invoiceable items. So your 3 invoiceable items going into an invoice. The invoice turns into an accrual because it is now realized. It's on the books. The contractual the contractual clock has started. So we know if you have like a net 30 invoice term and you send it on the 30th of January, by the end of next February, you should be paid according to contract. I very rarely see that happen, everyone. So I'd love to see a world where sponsors and CROs do pay on time, but it's happening. So this is how you would record your invoiceable, auto pay, and monthly accrual. And you can, if you want to do accrual based off of your line items, dry ice, monitoring visit, amendment, you're going to have a service date, but then I wouldn't recommend counting that as accrual for aging purposes until you have an invoice date, a send date for that invoice. Okay, so that was the monthly accrual. Let's talk about what happens in the big picture, and it's a giant cycle. So let's say that we're in December, we had question mark, we had some kind of accrual going into January. So January 1st, we go in, we have money that's owed to us. We have all these reporting. We have all this stuff that's left over from the past that's entering the month. Okay, so now the month happens. You did some work. You got a monthly accrual, invoices and AR and everything. And then also, hopefully, you got some bank deposits as cash received. And then you found out some things. Maybe you had screen fails that were accrued that you found out you didn't get paid for. So you had to adjust them out of your accrual. So you have a series of additions and subtractions into your report. And by January 31st, when you're done with the month, you're going to have a whole other number. So if you have, let's say that you're at $50,000 in December and all of these things happen, and then you end up at $45,000 going into February, what does that mean? Well, that means that if you went from 50 to 45, that means that odds are you either had to adjust off or you were paid more than what you earned, than your accrual that you accumulated for that month. Let's say it's the other way around. Let's say you're at $50,000 in December and all of these things happen, and now you're at $55,000 in February. That means that your AR battery is now growing. It means that you have earned or accrued more than what you have lost in that balance. And by lost, I mean cash received because it's deposited in your bank and you're no longer owed it, or adjustments where you had to write it off because it was an error. All right. So this is the blood of accrual, both on the monthly level through auto pay and invoice, all the way into the accumulation of it, all the way into the cycle where you have something from the past month, you do some things, and then you go through the month with another number. This is just a continual cycle of understanding the health of your accrual. Now, healthy accrual, you're going to adjust off things as soon as possible because you want that to be a very good and dependable number. This is the money that's owed to me. You're going to want to remit as soon as possible, which means that you're going to get a bank deposit. Hopefully you're going to have the remittance document. You're going to remit it and get it out of your AR battery because that would be a false security because you were paid for something and you think you're still owed it. So there's a lot of things around this. I know it's just a couple simple bubbles and obviously a really bad PowerPoint job, but there's a lot of concept around here to understand when it comes to looking at how you accrue revenue, how you adjust for it, and how you report it in the future. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. If you are a pro in accrual and I'm like totally off base, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. Let me figure out why you have a different opinion on how this works. All right. So next week, we are going to do a deep dive into auto pay visits. We talked about it a little bit now, but next week, we're really going to get into it. We're going to show the full process of it, try to figure out how that works, and try to figure out some of the largest challenges with auto pay visits. I think it'll be very good. So 20th anniversary, October 15th through 17th, SCRS. You don't have a hotel room yet, I'm sorry. It's going to be pretty jam-packed. It's going to be fun. So come by booth 920, come talk to the CRPN folks, and let's talk about this. You are going to have a cool experience if you come by booth 920. Check this out. See this? Yeah. So that's right. CRPN has an official board game. So come by the booth, come play a round of Let's Negotiate, come maybe share some ideas. Let's talk about, maybe learn something. And I'd love to see how each and every one of you play the negotiation game. We have gone through hundreds of rounds. We've laughed our butts off. It's a lot of fun, but at the same time, it is really eye-opening to see how the industry works on an industry level. And I look forward to sharing that with the rest of my community. So let me know if you want to play a board game. Come to booth 920, SCRS, we'll do that. How many board games do you think we should be running at once? I may actually need a couple volunteers, see if anyone wants to run a board game for me in case we get super busy. So let me know what you think, and we'll go from there. Connect with CRPN. Again, it's free for sites to join. We do try really hard to offer free trial opportunities to our members. We offer the best experience for sponsor CROs and sites. And importantly, you don't have to have an obligation to pay for CRPN services. We're there for you. We've got your back if you do need it. If you need an audit, need something like that, we're definitely there to help you, but it's not required. As long as you are supported, I'm happy. So there's the website, LinkedIn, YouTube, everything that you might need to contact CRPN. It's Dr. Fox. Please like, comment, subscribe, share your voice. See you next time.